Jared Coker Urbex is a small YouTube channel where the uploader posts raw footage of his explorations of abandoned locations all over the US. Since 2020, Jared has uploaded over 200 videos of some pretty cool Urbex footage. In March 2022, Jared uploaded a video where he explored an abandoned dog treat manufacturing factory in Wichita, Kansas. For the first few minutes of the video, the exploration is pretty uneventful, and except for the usual couple of strange thuds and bangs that can be heard nearby, it seems like Jared's alone. Even though it's relatively common for homeless people to hide out in abandoned buildings, it doesn't seem like anyone was squatting in the factory that day. After exploring the multiple floors of the building in detail, Jared looks out the window and sees a red car pulling up to the factory and start making its way through the gates.
He's gonna go around where I can't see him. I really do gotta get out of here now. I don't like that.
After it becomes obvious that the man in the red car has plans to enter the factory, Jared does the only reasonable thing in a situation like that and tries to find a way out of the building without being noticed. Unfortunately, the car goes around the building and out of his field of vision, which means that by the time the car is parked in front of the factory, the man could be anywhere.
Oh God, someone's right out there. What do I do? I couldn't tell what he was holding.
The man can be seen walking through the woods toward the front entrance of the factory. To make matters much worse, it appears as though the man has something in his hands, and from a distance, it's impossible to tell whether it's something as simple as a flashlight or a potential weapon.
Oh my God. Was that a gunshot? I think it was. He had something in his hand too. It must have been a gun.
Over the next few minutes, Jared does his best to find a way out undetected, which is much easier said than done when you have no idea where a potentially armed man who probably knows the layout of the building much better than you do is hiding. And just when it seemed like Jared was going to make it out undetected, this happens.
Whoa, whoa.
Stop right there.
Whoa.
Who else is with you?
Oh, it's just me. You scared me to death.
Okay. Get over there now.
What?
Sit down. I'll give you handcuffs.
Huh?
Put them on. Got it?
Okay.
Either I can put them on or you can put them on. Take your pick.
I've never put on handcuffs before.
Just put them on each side of you. How's that?
Well,
Put them in front of you. That way you can carry them in front, okay?
what's gonna happen?
What's going to happen is the police is going to come and then you take your name and they'll get you for criminal trespassing. It's nothing these days. It's a lot better than me shooting you, isn't it?
Was that what I heard?
Yeah.
What you shoot at?
Shoot it. See people, I shoot at them.
There
If
was
they
no-
run, you shoot. There you go.
Yeah.
Be cool, nothing will happen, okay?
All right.
I shot one guy this way, the other one. Well, it's all right. I'm not gonna shoot you. Don't you see? She said something says a use of deadly force. What do you think that is?
I thought that was kids spray paint.
No, that's me telling you I'll shoot you. Nobody else is with you, right?
No, it's just me.
Okay, if I see somebody, I'm gonna end up probably shooting them.
Oh no, if I
Okay.
were with someone and I know you shoot people, I would have gotten them.
Okay. I just don't want, they say wait, they scare me, I'll shoot in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just life.
The man, who appears to be an armed vigilante of some sort, pops out of the bushes just as Jared is about to leave and holds him hostage, even ordering him to put on a pair of handcuffs. During the exchange, it's hard to tell if the man is in his right mind, which makes the fact that he's carrying a fully equipped assault rifle that much more disturbing. At one point in the conversation, the man orders Jared to get into his car, and at that point, Jared doesn't really have a choice.
What we're gonna do is we'll throw your camera and your bag in the trunk, okay? And I'll put my gun in there too. All right? We'll get in a little red car, let's drive up here, set everything out, the police will come, they'll ask you for your driver's license, and they'll give you a little ticket.
Although Jared didn't record the part where he got into the car out of fear that the man would freak out if he realized he was being recorded, the YouTuber later explained that the cops took an hour and a half to get there. Disturbingly, when the cops finally arrived and while they were all talking, they saw two kids go up to the factory the same way Jared had, at which point the man looked the cops dead in the eye and said that if he saw the kids inside the factory, he was going to shoot them. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. As Jared was being taken to the police station for trespassing, the cops got a report that two kids had been shot at the factory. Thankfully, it turned out that the man was bluffing with his weapon, which was only loaded with non-lethal pellets. But still, the kids had to be taken to the hospital to be treated for their wounds. During the investigation, the man was identified as 62-year-old Ken Thomas, and even after shooting at the two kids, he was only sentenced to 2 years probation. Since that day, Jared hasn't gone back to the abandoned factory again. In 2019, a group of 5 real estate investors walked into a distressed property in the Angora neighborhood of southwest Philadelphia. The visit to the distressed house started out pretty ordinarily, but a few minutes in, just as one of the investors was about to walk up the staircase leading to the second floor, they noticed something extremely disturbing.
Look at this wire track right here. Look, the wire, right, that goes up
Look at the
to
nail
a
over
knife
there.
system.
Oh my god.
Dude, that kill
There,
somebody,
look
bro.
what is there, the knife. Right
See
there,
this?
right there. You see the wire?
You don't see the knife up there?
Right here. You see this wire going over here? It's going right to your heart.
It's on a crutch with a knife.
How'd you catch that?
Based on what the investors are saying, there appears to be some sort of booby trap system built into the staircase. Had any of them followed through with walking up the staircase, a seemingly innocent house walkthrough could have turned bad very quickly. After analyzing the booby trap for a few minutes, they decided to activate it to see what would have happened to the investor if he had continued climbing the flight of stairs.
Alright, here, you got it?
Yeah.
You send this
Look at where you tripping. Stop at the
Yeah.
bottom of the step.
You think?
Yeah.
What is it?
At the step.
Oh!
Look at that. Yo, that straight
Down.
up killed you right in the head.
Look at it.
Yo, that's right.
No. Hold on. You need to stop more. You need to step over.
Yo, that would have got you right in your neck.
Oh my God! Right in his head.
No, my heart.
Yo, you gotta send
head.
this video.
Disturbingly, the knife comes down right at the level of the investor's neck as soon as the wire is activated. It's hard to imagine what kind of psychopath would booby trap a house like that, knowing that whoever walked up that flight of stairs probably wouldn't live to tell the tale. Even though the trap was built in a very do-it-yourself kind of way with a rusted knife, some duct tape, some wire, and a crutch, the speed at which the knife was designed to come down right at neck level obviously means that whoever built it wasn't playing around and meant to do some serious damage. In the interview with NBC, the investor who recorded the whole thing mentioned that he was used to finding some pretty strange things in the distressed houses he often renovates. But even though he was no stranger to abandoned dogs, homeless people squatting, and drug houses with bags and scales, he had never been this close to losing his life, much less to a booby-trapped house. Shockingly, even after what happened, the investor still went on to explore the rest of the house, buy it, and renovate it. Fortunately, they didn't run into any more traps along the way. Finders Beepers History Seekers is a YouTube channel where urban explorers Matt and Andy document their visits to hundreds of abandoned locations around the world. What's funny about this channel is they always bring their dog Bear with them on their exploration, setting him up with his own GoPro camera to capture footage they might otherwise miss. In March 2023, they uploaded footage of their visit to an abandoned house in the UK. Throughout their first few minutes of their exploration, Matt and Andy come across all kinds of old history books, kitchen utensils, and other abandoned objects, but for the most part, nothing too out of the ordinary. About 25 minutes into the visit, as Matt and Andy are sorting through dozens of history books lying around the house, this happens.
And then why has that got a lock on it there for a bathroom cabinet? That makes no sense at all. Bear, you're just causing so much bother. Did you hear that? Someone has definitely just run down those stairs. Hello? 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 We're not secure. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to hurt you. Urban Explorers. Just having a look round. Hello? I'm going to have to watch you back. That was definitely somebody running down the stairs. 100% that was someone running down the stairs.
Pretty much as soon as they go up to the second floor bedroom, they hear what sounds like someone or something running down the stairs. It's pretty disturbing to think that someone could have been watching them the whole time, but despite their best efforts, they weren't able to find whoever it was. That's when they decided to review the GoPro footage on their dog Bear to see if it showed anything. And a bit before they heard footsteps running down the stairs, his camera caught this. Disturbingly, there was someone hiding under the bed in the second floor bedroom. Even though it's hard to see everything clearly with the dog footage, it's pretty obvious that it was a person hiding under the bed. After the encounter, Matt and Andy continued exploring the house for another 20 minutes, and they confessed to feeling pretty on edge after leaving. To this day, they still don't know who was hiding under the bed. It's pretty likely that the guy under the bed was just a squatter who was probably more scared of them and left the house in a hurry to get some privacy. But still, it must have been incredibly chilling to review the footage and realize they were never alone. Exploration Unknown is a YouTube channel owned by a guy named John who's uploaded countless videos of his urban explorations since 2016. In March 2019, John and another YouTuber explored an abandoned house where a woman had reportedly taken her life years after the death of her child. Just a few minutes into the video, it becomes pretty clear that the structure of the building is extremely unstable.
That floor is gone right there. That's a deep drop. These floors are not very stable.
Hear it?
Yeah. You guys check out that fireplace.
If that falls, dude, I don't know what it's going to do to the rest of this house.
Yeah, I know, because that's a load-bearing wall out there.
That's going to be a lot of weight to hit this floor. I'm really nervous about that right there.
Yeah, and look at the ceiling.
We need to get out of here before that happens.
When it comes to urbex, a lot of people will talk about the risks of running into a hostile squatter, a rabid stray dog, or the cops. But one of the biggest risks when exploring unstable structures like these is falling through the floor or having the entire building collapse on you, leaving you trapped under tons and tons of rubble. Before John and Tim even get the chance to explore the rest of the house, something pretty scary that serves as a reminder of the dangers of urban exploration happens to John.
Alright guys, I think we've decided to chance it. What do you think, Tim? I think we talked about it.
It hasn't moved anymore.
Let's just stay away from that area.
Yes.
Let's go back here to the room where the wife... You didn't fall through the floor, did you?
No, but it cracked a little.
Oh man, there's a crib in here. Oh shoot.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just fell through the floor. Ow, God.
You alright, man?
Oh,
We need to go.
we gotta get out of here.
By the time John realized the floor was cracking, it was already too late. Luckily, he was able to shift all his weight onto his other leg before he fell entirely through. Otherwise, he would have plummeted at least 10 feet into the basement below. Obviously, after that close call, the pair of explorers decided to call it a night and carefully treaded their way out of the house and back to the car. Since that incident, John has continued to upload videos pretty frequently to his channel, but he hasn't gone back to that house since. TP Urbex is a channel dedicated 100% to urban exploration, and even though it's only been active for a little over a year, it's already grown to over 350,000 subscribers. In January 2024, a video was uploaded to the channel featuring 2 young urban explorers visiting an abandoned high school. From my research, the school that was featured in the video was William A. Wirt High School in Gary, Indiana, located less than a mile from Lake Michigan. Even though the abandoned building is in absolutely terrible condition in the footage, it's still clear that back in the day it was probably a nice school. Out of the entire school, the auditorium seems to be in the best condition, with the bright red seats serving as a nostalgic reminder of what the school used to look like before it was closed. As the teens are walking through the aisles, they catch a glimpse of a man holding a metal pipe staring them down near the auditorium entrance.
Looks like some kids got in here and were throwing some stuff from the balcony area. Oh, hey, what's up, man? You want us to get on out of here? Hey, we'll leave, bro. We'll leave, all right? Come on. Let's go. Just get out anywhere. This door right here. You sure? Let's go. Yo, let's go.
The man with the pipe started chasing them out of the building, but stopped when they got outside. It's pretty disturbing how the guy never even speaks to the teenagers. He just starts chasing them with a metal pipe that he probably planned to use as a makeshift weapon. When this kind of stuff happens, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of everyone involved. I mean, the guy who chased them out, like usual, was probably a homeless guy who had been squatting at the school for a while. Through his eyes, the abandoned, decrepit building is his home, and having 2 teenagers come in unannounced to disturb your peace when you have nowhere else to go must be pretty irritating. But for the explorers who just want to have some fun in an old building, getting chased out by someone who's armed and probably not in their right mind is also a terrifying experience. In September 2020, John and Tim from Exploration Unknown uploaded a video where they documented their visit to an abandoned altar in the middle of the woods. From the very start of the visit, some red flags came up that John and Tim should probably have taken as invitations to leave.
Where are we?
It's supposed to be public land.
This is private property, bro.
Well, maybe it's like this over here, somebody's private property. And I know this over here should be like public land.
After seeing the sign, it's unclear if the 2 explorers are on a private or a public road. But a couple of minutes later, after following the directions they were given, they got their answer.
Saw something behind you. Shh. Okay, dude, key light. Kill your light, dude. Oh my God, dude, it's a car. Shh. Hide. Dude, they were waiting. Somebody's here. Shh. Get down. Oh God, dude, we gotta get out of here. You shut that engine off. Oh God, he's getting out.
Hey, I've seen your damn lights up there.
Oh God. Dude, he's got
Get off my property.
He's got a gun. Okay, we gotta get out of here. Okay. Go. Oh God. Tim, you okay? You okay? Get up, dude. Come on. Get up. Are you hit? Oh God, run, dude, run. Okay.
After getting out of his car, a man who we can reasonably assume to be the property owner points his gun at the uploader and his friend and tells them to get off his property. This is one of those situations that you just never want to be in, because on the one hand, if you yell something out to try to calm the guy down, you signal your location to someone with a deadly weapon who may or may not be in his right mind. But on the other hand, if you don't signal your location, the property owner might feel threatened. As they were running out of the woods, the man shot at them, and initially it looked like Tim fell to the ground from being shot at. But it seems like he just tripped either by something on the ground or by being startled by the sound of the gunshot. Fortunately, Tim and John were able to get out of those woods unscathed, and they never went back again. I really don't know where John got his intel about the supposed abandoned altar in the middle of the woods, but it was clearly faulty. And it's a good thing he was able to spot the guy in the car ahead of time. Otherwise, who knows if this video would have even been uploaded. On May 6, 2019, YouTuber Connor Kelly posted a video of him exploring an abandoned McCoy gold mine in the Nevada desert. However, what was supposed to be nothing more than a fun adventure with his family quickly turned into a disturbing experience, one that would likely stay with the group for the rest of their lives. The exploration of this mine started off quite normal, with the group staying silent to avoid causing an accidental cave-in as seen by the text they put on screen. However, after about a minute and a half of treading deeper into the mine, Connor noticed something strangely reflective on the path ahead.
So, do you see that reflection? You're trying to...
Oh, Jesus, what the... It's a shoe.
Oh,
Look, is that like a fossil? Dead animal or human?
okay. Wait, don't move, Wyatt.
What they found reflecting back at them was a shoe amongst many more in a massive pile with random bones scattered throughout.
That's a bone right there. Actually, there's quite a few bones in this.
What made this pile even more odd was the sheer variety of shoes on display. Many of them were clearly very modern, while some were models that were released over 30 years ago. How could such a random assortment of shoes end up in an abandoned gold mine in the middle of nowhere? Things took an even darker turn when the group ventured further into the cave and found a bunch of bones, including a relatively intact spine.
So this is water flow. It is gonna be great. So we can't trust this.
Yeah, don't step any closer.
By this point, the group was growing increasingly unsettled by these disturbing discoveries, prompting them to leave the cave as quickly as possible. And that's where the original video ends, without any explanation or resolution. Connor didn't provide any more information in the video's description or in the comments. He posted 4 more videos after this, but none of these videos included any updates on the disturbing encounter either. So, what's going on here? One of the first things that comes to mind is that this mine was the collection spot for a serial killer. This would explain both the shoes and the bones. A top comment on the video also backs this theory, stating, "If you ever listen to the Missing 411 videos, you know shoes are a major component of missing or abducted people. This sent chills down my spine." Which is true. A statistical analysis of the Missing 411 data shows that over 15% of the cases involve absent shoes. However, this theory isn't entirely likely. For starters, I couldn't find any news reports regarding this mysterious pile of shoes, which is odd since judging from the number of shoes, this supposed killer would have had hundreds of victims. If this pile had such a violent history, it probably wouldn't go unnoticed by the media. More importantly, many people on the internet agree that the bones in the video are not human. The group in the video reaches the same conclusion when looking at the bones for the first time.
No, it looks like a cow or a horse. Way too big for a human.
Put simply, the odds of this being a serial killer trophy cave are very low. But given the animal bones scattered throughout the area, it's possible it was the feeding spot of a predator like a mountain lion. Though, while that might explain the bones, it offers no clues about the pile of shoes. One theory I haven't seen anyone else bring up is that the shoes might have ended up there because of flooding. You see, the McCoy mine where the video was filmed is located in Lander County, and from what I can find, that area is quite prone to flooding. So it's entirely possible that someone dumped their sneaker collection in the middle of nowhere to get rid of it, only for it to be carried in the abandoned mine with rainwater. A mountain lion could have moved in later, which would explain the bones. The only proof I have of this theory is that the ground in the deepest part of the mine is extremely wet and has water flow marks leading into it. Other than that, it's pure speculation. That said, another potential explanation for both the bones and the shoes is that Connor placed them there himself in hopes of creating a viral video. People on the internet have pointed out that the bones in the video are a bit too clean for something left in a muddy cave by a predator. Some have also claimed that a few of the bones look like they're inorganic fabrications. Another inconsistency in Connor's video is that he and his group keep claiming that all the shoes in the pile are kid-sized.
There's no doll shoes in there.
No adult shoes.
He even mentioned that in the video's title, which reads, "Kids' Shoes and Bones Found in Abandoned Mine." Now, while that makes an already creepy situation even more disturbing, it's simply not true. There are plenty of adult-sized shoes visible in this pile. Unfortunately, I doubt we'll ever know what happened here for sure. It's been 6 years since the video was uploaded, and as I mentioned earlier, Connor has vanished completely from the internet ever since. Action Adventure Twins is a YouTube channel run by brothers James and Edward. The duo has been exploring dangerous and crammed caves since early 2020. Yet, despite their combined experience, one of them almost lost his life back in 2022. In January of that year, the two decided to explore the popular Petty John's Cave in Georgia. They had already explored parts of this maze-like cave multiple times before, and had even found an underground waterfall during one of their expeditions. Put simply, they were pretty confident in their ability to navigate through this cave. But unlike their previous ventures, this time they were going to tackle one of the hardest sections, the aptly named Nervous Breakdown, referring to how cavers feel when going through it. Things started off just as expected, with the pair going through the narrow and claustrophobic entrance to reach the first open area of the Petty John's Cave.
Whoa, entrance room.
However, it didn't take long for the cave to begin closing back again, forcing the two to squeeze through tiny passageways. But that was only the beginning. After about 25 minutes of crawling through increasingly tighter spaces, they reached the first big obstacle, a muddy room with a narrow and steep hole in the middle. They had to carefully walk around this hole to progress. A single slip meant falling into the narrow hole and possibly getting injured. And given the lack of safe footing around the hole, it would have been near impossible for the other person to pull them out. After successfully navigating around this obstacle, they finally arrived at the entrance to Nervous Breakdown. Unfortunately for them, things weren't looking good. The area surrounding this entrance had collapsed some time ago, making it very difficult to figure out the path ahead. After looking around for a bit, Edward eventually found the real entrance and was excited to go in. He genuinely couldn't wait to find out what was down there and began his descent, leaving his brother behind in case something bad happened. What he didn't realize was that this was about to be one of the worst decisions he'd ever make. Because after descending for a few minutes, Edward called for his brother only to be met with complete silence.
I found a rope. Oh, I don't hear James anymore. Uh-oh.
In other words, Edward was now lost in an unknown section of the cave without any means of contacting his brother. At first, he tried to stay calm and continued his descent, hoping to find James before long. However, after staying separated for over 30 minutes, the realization set in. He knew panic was the fastest way to make a bad situation worse, but at this point, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease.
James! James! It's been like 30 minutes since I last saw him. I don't even know where I'm at. I tried to go back to the last place I saw him, and everything just looks the same. It's just a jumble maze. We should have never split up.
After calling out to James many times with no luck, he decided to retrace his steps and find the way back. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the difficulty of the maze he was about to enter. Every direction looked the same. The narrow passages and jagged walls made it impossible to tell where he had come from. To top it all off, his situation was getting worse with each step he took. If he went the wrong way, he could easily wedge himself into a passage too tight to escape, or worse, plunge into a hidden drop-off. This is the true horror of caving. Even if he didn't injure himself, he could have just as easily wandered around aimlessly until his body gave way into exhaustion, leaving him lifeless in a cold, rocky crevice. The footage of him excitedly dropping into the Nervous Breakdown entrance would have ended with the camera recording his descent into confusion, fear, and eventually silence. Fortunately, that wasn't the end of his story. After going in loops for a while, Edward spotted a single piece of tape he saw on his way down.
Oh. The tape. Yeah. Okay, this tape looks familiar. Oh, yeah. This has got to be the way. I'm getting close. James! Still nothing.
This unexpected clue turned out to be exactly what he needed. It helped him regain his bearings and finally head in the right direction. Finally, he heard the best sound he could have heard in that moment.
James! Oh. You're over here? Oh. Dude. This place is a maze, man.
Oh, hey, I see your light.
Dude. I thought we were never gonna see each other.
Dude, I know.
Oh.
The two stayed together for the rest of the expedition and made it out alive without any major injuries. They're still exploring caves on YouTube, but now with a lot more caution. In January of 2014, a group of cave explorers decided to conquer the Lost John's Cave in Lancashire, England. It's a vast cave network that spans a length of nearly 3 miles, or 4.8 kilometers. The known deepest section of this cave also goes down a staggering 690 feet, or 211 meters. Most members of this group had been spelunking for years, and like most other cave explorers, were quite confident in their skills. They had also done their research and mapped out their route in advance. But the truth about caving is, when things go wrong, no amount of planning can save you. Even the most experienced and well-prepared explorers can find themselves in terrifying situations, which is exactly what happened to one of the members of this group, named Bob Johnson. The expedition was going quite smoothly in the beginning, with the group using the equipment they brought with them to continue safely. That is, until they reached a section of the cave called the Tube. It was an unusually narrow section that required the cavers to crawl on their stomach. And to make matters worse, it was also partially submerged in water, making it difficult to both see and breathe. Despite these harsh conditions, the group decided to move ahead. The slimmest member of the group went first and successfully made it to the other side without much trouble. The next person, however, wasn't as fortunate. This was Bob Johnson, the man we mentioned earlier. His crawl through the tube wasn't off to a good start, as he was already having issues with the comparatively wider sections of the passage. He then somehow managed to reach the tightest part of this treacherous section, but that's where his luck ran out. He was completely stuck from the waist down, and any attempt to free himself only made the situation worse. Now, being stuck in a narrow cave like this is extremely stressful on its own. The walls close in on you, and every movement feels like it's pushing you further into the tight space. Panic sets in as you realize just how little room you have to maneuver, and with each failed attempt to free yourself, the fear intensifies. But as if the confined space wasn't enough to make his heart race, Bob now had to contend with something far more terrifying: the rapidly flowing water. Water makes any caving venture 10 times worse. In a dry cave, even if you're stuck, you still have time to think and plan your escape. But when water starts to rise, the situation shifts from bad to life-threatening. The feeling of water creeping up around you in an already claustrophobic space is a nightmare on its own. The real danger with water, however, is that you have mere minutes before drowning becomes a very real possibility. Bob knew this possibility all too well. He gave his all to free himself. Unfortunately, the water was quickly filling up his suit, making it even more difficult to squeeze through. But when the situation seemed hopeless, one of the members had an idea that ended up saving Bob's life. Instead of pushing forward, the members behind him tried pulling him back, and it worked.
Yeah, it looks tight. Billy, I get it. Pull in!
Bob was finally free, though his troubles weren't over. He later revealed in a comment that him and the two members who pulled him back had crawled for another 3 hours to get out of the cave from a different exit. This incident also left him traumatized to the point where he can't even watch this video without becoming anxious. From what I can find, he scaled back on caving and picked up a much safer hobby in cycling, and now appears to be doing just fine. On the 7th of September 2024, the Action Adventure Twins YouTube channel posted a video exploring a mysterious cave someone found on their property. This is the same channel we talked about earlier, where the two brothers got separated and almost lost their lives in the maze-like cave. They've learned their lessons since and approached this one with far more caution. But with an entrance as life-threatening as this one, even the best precautions could have proven to not be enough.
Alright, so the guy dropped us off halfway up the hill, and he doesn't know anybody who's been down this thing, but we are at the cave. He says he threw a rope down it with a rock and it was 200 feet deep before it stopped. So we got this stick here. We're gonna see if our rope reaches. It's still, oh, you were right, it kept going.
This alone is enough to terrify most people, with one person stating, "This channel has given me a new fear about walking in the woods. The fact that you could just slip and fall down a hole like that is insane. Now anytime I go anywhere, I wonder how many massive voids are right below my feet that I could fall into at any moment." But that didn't deter Edward and James. They quickly secured their rope to a nearby tree and began descending into the steep cave. What they found inside was nothing short of breathtaking. That tiny opening gave way to a vast chasm.
Oh wow. Yeah. This is a big one, man.
However, before they could fully take in the beauty of the cavern, things took a dark turn. Just seconds into the cave, the two discovered what looked like human remains scattered throughout.
That's comforting. Human bones, huh?
Look how big they are.
Dude, look behind you. There's like a little shrine of them. There's like, oh, that's a cranium.
Dude, is that a human?
Nah, I don't know. It's awfully round.
Yeah, that looks human, man.
That doesn't necessarily make, I don't know. I'm not a bone expert.
From there, they continued exploring the cave as it kept getting bigger the further they went into it. They also discovered old caving equipment like ropes and harnesses already secured to the walls, a detail that only deepened the mystery surrounding the bones they had found earlier. If they did belong to a person, as the two suspected, it was possible they belonged to a previous explorer. This explorer likely had an accident and died in the cave without ever making it out. On their way in, they did find scattered bones right below the entrance. These were likely the remains of people who accidentally fell into the otherwise unassuming hole. However, the bones they found further inside were too far from the entrance to have belonged to someone who simply fell in. It's also possible that these remains belonged to the victim of a deranged killer. Someone who either had ended a person's life within the cave, or maybe threw the person into the hole and later dragged their body further into the cave. Some people, however, weren't convinced and accused the brothers of faking the whole thing, especially since the way Edward and James handled some of these remains felt a bit too casual. That said, while YouTubers faking these finds to get a viral video isn't uncommon, this one turned out to be true. The video received several comments from experts confirming that these remains were indeed real and human, with one such person writing, "My girlfriend and I are watching from Canada. We're both paramedics, definitely a human femur and a human cranium. But this raised an even bigger question. When did the owner of these bones pass away? If they disappeared into the cave in the last few decades, this discovery could end up cracking an unsolved case." I ended up contacting the Action Adventure Twins to see what they had to say or if they had made any police reports afterwards. We ended up contacting the authorities about the bones. They were determined to be human and were apparently a Native American that either slipped and fell into the pit cave or was thrown in there after death and are 2,000 years old. While this did rule out the possibility that these bones belonged to someone more recent, the despair of whoever ended up in that cave alone 2,000 years ago is just as impossible to ignore. They likely fell into the cave, somehow survived the fall, and ended up starving to death while looking for a way out. On October 28, 2004, 50-year-old Australian airline pilot and scuba diver David John Shaw broke the world record for the deepest successful dive in history. He achieved this by reaching a depth of 270 meters in Bushman's Hole, one of the deepest freshwater caves in the world. The sole purpose of this dive was to break the record. However, when he reached the bottom, he found something that stopped him in his tracks. He found the body of Dion Dreyer, a 20-year-old scuba diver who died in that cave 10 years ago. Since humans start sinking after a certain depth, Dion's body never floated back to the surface. Given the extreme difficulty and danger of diving this deep, any plans to retrieve his body were also cancelled at the time of his death. However, a plaque in his name was installed near the diving point of Bushman's Hole, which is how Dave knew what he was looking at. After staring at the body in shock for a few seconds, Dave immediately got closer and tried to retrieve Dion. Unfortunately, after a decade in the water, his tanks were firmly stuck in the mud. More importantly, Dave had already spent too much time at that depth. Staying any longer would have been fatal. So he decided to tie a line to Dion's body and return to the surface with the newfound information.
Wasn't very steep. And when I saw the body over to my left, I thought, oh, that's the end of going deep. So just tied my line to it. And by then I was, well, we won't discuss that. So I just left my line.
The news of Dion's body being discovered spread quickly, eventually culminating in Dave talking to his parents and promising to retrieve it. After a couple months of preparation, the next dive was scheduled for January 8th, 2005. Unfortunately, Dave's heroic attempt to bring closure to Dion's parents ended in a catastrophe far worse than anyone could have imagined. Cave diving, aka underwater cave exploration, is far more dangerous than regular spelunking. The divers have to manage their oxygen levels at all times, avoid often sharp rock formations, and explore the cave system in a far darker environment because even the brightest flashlights aren't as effective underwater, all while making sure they don't get lost. Add in the immense pressure of 270 meters of water above, it becomes an almost insurmountable challenge, one that only a handful of people on the planet are capable of overcoming. So, everything needed to be perfect for Dave's operation to succeed. He worked with police divers, the defense force, and medics to ensure everything went smoothly, and they planned the dive second by second. According to the plan, Dave would use the line he tied earlier to reach Dion's body. After cutting it loose and putting it in a special body bag, he would begin his descent. This descent would have taken around 12 hours to avoid decompression sickness. So instead of holding on to Dion's body the entire time, Dave would pass it along to his longtime friend Don Shirley at 220 meters. Don would then hand it over to support divers located at various depths and keep checking on Dave for any issues. Sadly, this is not how it went. An hour and a half after the dive began, the surface crew received an ominous message from the support divers, claiming that they hadn't seen any activity from Dave or Don. Shortly after, another message reached the surface. This one was from Don, stating that he's seeing Dave in the distance, and he's not moving.
Don's okay. Dave's okay.
While this message was making its way to the surface, Don tried to reach Dave himself. He exceeded his target depth, which resulted in his rebreather controller imploding. This also led to him suffering from oxygen poisoning and vomiting while 220 meters under the water. Fortunately, he managed to keep hold of the line and was eventually pulled out of the water still breathing. Dave, however, didn't make it. But when rescue teams pulled out his body, they made a shocking discovery. Dion's body was attached to the recovery line as well. Following the recovery, investigators looked at the footage captured by the waterproof camera mounted on Dave's head. This is what they saw. Though I should mention, I couldn't find the raw footage from that camera. The only clip of it online is narrated by Don himself, Dave's best friend who we just talked about who almost died trying to save his life. The footage shows Dave moving alongside the line to find Dion's body, and then trying to put it in the bag. Unfortunately, this is where the plan started falling apart. Dion's body was unexpectedly loose from the mud and was moving around uncontrollably. Dave tried to complete his mission despite this, only to end up getting tangled in the line.
This line is just getting everywhere because this body is floating. It's not stuck. Everything's moving. Right, light gets caught on the line there. Move it out of the way. Still got a nice bright light.
All this effort caused him to neglect his gauges, resulting in Dave feeling the effects of nitrogen narcosis, which include poor judgment, trouble concentrating, and reduced muscle and nerve function. Put simply, he lost everything he needed to survive at that depth. He tried to cut the tangled line, but the lack of coordination made it near impossible. As he was struggling to stay conscious, the last thing he saw was the terrifying view of Dion's lifeless face mask staring back at him. Shortly after this, Dave passed away. The only silver lining was that the tangled line kept Dion's body close to Dave, allowing him to successfully complete his mission by recovering the body, only at the cost of his own life. On the morning of August 26, 2015, WDBJ reporter 24-year-old Allison Parker and her cameraman 27-year-old Adam Ward visited the Bridgewater Plaza near Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. Their goal was to do a live interview with the executive director of the local Chamber of Commerce, Vicki Gardner, about an upcoming event at the lake. Things went just as planned initially, with Adam setting up the camera equipment and Allison starting the interview at 6:45 a.m. What none of them knew, however, was that they were about to become the victims of a crazed stalker. Just seconds into the interview, an armed man walked up to the group and opened fire. The live feed cut back to the in-studio reporter, who was just as shocked at what happened as the many viewers watching live. Tragically, by the time first responders arrived, both Allison and Adam had already succumbed to their injuries and passed away. Vicki was badly hurt as well, but she managed to play dead and ultimately survive the encounter despite getting shot in the back. As for the perpetrator, he had already fled the scene by this point, and with no nearby CCTV capturing a clear image of his face or vehicle, investigators were left at a dead end. But then, someone at the WDBJ network analyzed the footage further, which revealed one blurry but still recognizable frame of the person responsible for this tragedy. This was 41-year-old Vester Lee Flanagan, a former WDBJ reporter who went by the professional name of Bryce Williams. He'd actually worked with both Allison and Adam in the past, but was fired from his job after higher-ups received several reports of workplace aggression. However, what seemed like a disgruntled ex-employee lashing out at his former colleagues at first turned out to have a far darker backstory to it. You see, Vester had an extensive history of being difficult to work with, long before he joined WDBJ. He was fired from one of his early reporting jobs from NBC affiliate WTWC in the year 2000 for, quote, odd behavior towards his coworkers. While the exact reason for his termination was never revealed to the public, from what I was able to find, it had something to do with him being aggressive and trying to intimidate others. But instead of admitting fault, he filed a racial discrimination lawsuit against his employer, which eventually ended with an out-of-court settlement. However, that was only the beginning. From there, he found work at multiple other stations, but struggled to build a career at one place, largely due to the many altercations he got into with his colleagues. He had severe anger management issues and would often resort to physically confronting his coworkers over even the smallest disagreements.
He had increasing conflicts with people at the station, especially the floor crew, some of the other reporters, some of the photographers in the field, to the point where he was threatening people, had some physical confrontations with a couple of people, and at one point became such a distraction that we finally had to terminate him.
He eventually secured a position at WDBJ in March of 2012, and it was the same story once again. It didn't take long for him to fall into the same pattern of anger and bullying there as well. Just months into his employment, the WDBJ management had already received multiple reports of his coworkers feeling threatened or uncomfortable working with him. In fact, his behavior at WDBJ was worse than at any of his previous jobs, leading to his termination in January 2013, less than a year after he started. He even had to be escorted out by police when he refused to accept his termination and threatened his superiors with violence. Vester once again tried to play the racial discrimination card and singled out Allison and Adam for the alleged racist behavior. However, a third-party investigation didn't find any evidence of discrimination, and his case was thrown out. He likely named them because he knew they were among the coworkers who had filed complaints against him. After his shameful termination from WDBJ, he struggled to find work elsewhere in the industry, and his resentment against the two colleagues he believed had destroyed his life only grew with each setback. This resentment reached its tipping point on the morning of August 26, 2015. He tracked down where Allison and Adam were doing their next job and stalked them as they were getting ready to go live. As soon as they began the interview, Vester walked up to them and opened fire. But this was only part one of his plan. You see, while Adam's camera did catch Vester for a split second, the footage wasn't clear enough for the investigators to name him as the prime suspect with complete certainty. Fortunately, this doubt vanished quickly when, at 8:26 a.m., Vester faxed a 23-page manifesto to ABC News, admitting to everything. Though most of these pages were filled with nothing more than the incoherent ramblings of an extremely angry and mentally unwell man. In them, he described himself as a human powder keg just waiting to go boom, how he was angry at the world, and mentioned the Charleston church incident as his tipping point. How that connected to him taking the lives of his former coworkers was never entirely clear. Then, at 11:14 a.m., he also uploaded a video of the crime he'd recorded from his point of view on Facebook. This left no doubt that Vester was the one behind the incident, prompting an immediate nationwide manhunt. Tracing his cell phone allowed the officers to find him on the highway, attempting to flee the state in a rented vehicle at 11:20 a.m. But when they tried to pull him over, he sped up and eventually crashed onto the side of the road. And before the officers could reach his car, he decided to end the chase with the firearm he had on him, bringing the manhunt to a sudden, shocking conclusion. On the 25th of June 2014, Charles Bothell went on the Nancy Grace Show seeking the public's help in finding his missing son. 12-year-old Charlie was first reported missing from his home in Detroit, Michigan 11 days ago on June 14th. His father, Charles, had been doing everything in his power to help locate his son, from going door to door in his neighborhood to spreading missing person posters throughout the city. Unfortunately, despite dozens of people, including the FBI looking for him, the young boy was nowhere to be found. And the hope of finding him alive was diminishing with each passing day. Appearing on live TV was Charles' last-ditch effort to raise awareness about his son's disappearance, hoping someone with information might see the show. However, just minutes into the broadcast, the interview took a bizarre turn when Nancy received a report that no one expected.
The father of the missing 12-year-old boy, Charlie, with me is his father, Charlie Bothell. Charlie, we're getting reports that your son has been found in your basement. Sir?
Apparently, while Charles was on TV, investigators obtained a search warrant to conduct a thorough search of his home. There, they found Charlie huddled in the basement behind a massive pile of barrels and boxes. Upon hearing the news of his son's discovery, Charles reacted with complete shock.
How could your son be alive in your basement?
I have no idea.
However, something about his reaction felt extremely off. Many argued that a normal father would have ended the interview immediately and rushed to the son he hadn't seen in 11 days. Charles, on the other hand, seemed more concerned with denying the report and trying to prove his innocence.
Sir, did you check your basement?
I checked my basement, the FBI checked my basement, the Detroit police checked my basement, my wife checked my basement. I've been down there several times. We've all been checking.
He even lashed out at other reports for insinuating that he knowingly forced his son to hide in the basement, when in reality, his actions were far more cruel than anyone could have expected. The truth came to light as soon as the investigators found Charlie. According to him, his stepmother, Monique Dillard Bothell, was the one who ordered him to hide in the basement. She also told him not to make any sound, no matter what he heard. From there, they spread the rumor that their son had gone missing and began looking for him. But despite their cries for help, they were very uncooperative with the police to ensure that Charlie wouldn't be found. Investigators only sought the search warrant because they suspected Charlie was already dead. As for why the couple would do this, that remains a mystery to this day. Both have continued to claim they knew nothing about Charlie's whereabouts. Though, given what we know, the most likely explanation is that they wanted to exert even more control over his life. You see, when the investigators located Charlie, he had severe cuts and bruises on his body, likely from his parents. In addition to that, growing up, he also had to endure a grueling daily exercise routine that included 100 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, and 100 jumping jacks twice a day. Charlie was already homeschooled and cut off from the rest of society. Maybe the couple thought that faking his disappearance would allow them to do whatever they wanted without any oversight. Regardless of their intentions, their crime was clear as day. The two were arrested shortly after and stood trial over the upcoming months, with Charlie himself coming forward to testify against them. And while they were able to avoid jail time due to a plea deal, they lost complete custody of Charlie, who now lives safely with other relatives. On the evening of November 19, 2014, the Rockville, Maryland Fire Department responded to an intense house fire. The fire had engulfed the entire double-story house and was getting more and more intense with each passing minute. It took them over an hour to get the fire under control, and the house was barely standing by that point. Now, fires like these can start for any number of reasons, from a stove left on to an electrical short. However, before the investigators could even think about determining the cause, 27-year-old Carlos Peralta, who was one of the residents of the house, walked up to an ABC7 reporter covering the incident live and made the wildest revelation. According to him, this fire was the result of arson. Not only that, but he was the one who started the fire just hours earlier.
Me, I set it on fire.
Given the sheer strangeness of this unsolicited confession, the reporter didn't believe him at first. But Carlos was more than happy to provide more details of how he committed the crime.
I just poured gasoline on the floor, set it on fire, and went to buy a drink and came back.
Minutes later, he walked up to the police officers standing nearby and confessed to them as well. His clothes had the smell of gasoline, and a basic search revealed a lighter in his pocket, providing the officers enough evidence to believe his story and arrest him on the spot. As for his motive, Carlos claimed that he did all this to get the media's attention about the deplorable living conditions in that house. However, burning down the house he wanted to report on made little sense. That is, until investigators dug further into his history and discovered that he'd been suffering from schizophrenia as well as alcoholism for the past few years. He was also arrested for destruction of property just 2 weeks before this incident. Put simply, this house fire was the doing of a mentally troubled man who genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. The fire ended up causing $400,000 in property damage. Fortunately, the other 5 residents, including Carlos's own mother, were able to escape without any harm. Though what happened to Carlos after his arrest was never made public. But given the severity of his crime, he was likely sentenced to several years in prison. On July 27, 2007, news helicopters in Phoenix, Arizona were reporting on a live police chase that was happening in the city. The chase had begun about 22 minutes earlier when the police identified and pulled over a stolen flatbed pickup truck. In an attempt to avoid arrest, the driver, 23-year-old Christopher J. Jones, reversed into the police cruiser and tried to flee the scene. Unfortunately for him, word of the chase got out quickly, and minutes later, 6 different helicopters were tracking his every move. This included 1 police chopper and 5 others from different news stations. However, while everyone's eyes were fixated on the road, a tragedy was about to take place in the sky. Seemingly out of nowhere, 2 of the news helicopters' feeds abruptly stopped. They had crashed into each other before tumbling to the ground and exploding on impact. One of the helicopters involved in this crash belonged to an ABC affiliate network, KNXV, piloted by Craig Smith with camera operator Rick Krolak. The other was reporting back to an independent Phoenix station named KTVK with pilot Scott Bowerbank and photographer Jim Cox. All 4 were sadly killed instantly on impact, leaving the other reporters stunned and struggling to process the sudden tragedy. Fortunately, the helicopter's crash landed in an empty park, avoiding any additional casualties. A later investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the accident was the result of both pilots' failure to see and avoid the other helicopter. But that still raises the question of how. How could 2 experienced pilots make such a critical error? Well, the answer to that lies in how many news helicopters operated during that time. But first, an important thing to note is that when so many choppers are in close proximity, traditional air traffic control systems are not very useful. Instead, the pilots are instructed to operate under visual flight rules. In other words, they were responsible for keeping an eye on their surroundings and maintaining safe distance at all times. Now, this shouldn't have been an issue for experienced helicopter pilots like Craig and Scott. The issue, however, was that the 2 were doing a lot more than just flying the choppers. Not only did they have to monitor multiple communication channels with other helicopters, air traffic control, and the network, they were also reporting live on the action below as it unfolded before them. While juggling all these responsibilities, one of the pilots briefly lost awareness of their surroundings for just a few seconds. Tragically, that was long enough for the helicopters to drift too close and collide mid-air. The only silver lining was that the incident led to major reforms in news helicopter safety, including news stations using a shared single helicopter feed and studio ground-based reporting, measures that continue to save lives to this day. Christopher Brian Hill is an urban explorer with a YouTube channel called Urbex Hill. Over the past 10 years, he's been uploading raw footage of his visits to some of the creepiest abandoned buildings in the country, often running into unexpected and sometimes life-threatening situations. Urban explorers like Chris face many dangers. From aggressive stray dogs to hostile squatters to respiratory risks and unsound structures, venturing into an unfamiliar abandoned building is much more risky than it might sound. It's obviously much safer to explore abandoned buildings in the light of day and with a group of friends, but in most of his videos, Chris explores at night and always alone. In June 2022, he visited the abandoned Westinghouse Electric Factory located in Cleveland, Ohio. Built more than a century ago, the factory originally consisted of 7 different buildings, but most of them have been demolished by now. Even though the Westinghouse Company was established in 1886, it didn't reach Cleveland until 1894. Founded by Thomas Edison, Westinghouse is best known for the notable engineers who worked for the company, including Nikola Tesla and William Stanley. For several decades, the Westinghouse Company rivaled General Electric, and it was last used as a lighting equipment production plant before its abandonment in 1979. For the past 4.5 decades, the abandoned factory has been one of the hottest urban exploration locations for curious explorers and YouTubers. In 2012, the factory started receiving even more attention after the Black Widow interrogation scene from the first movie of the Avengers was shot there. 10 years later, Chris made the trip to the abandoned factory and recorded everything he saw. As Chris begins exploring, there doesn't seem to be anyone around, and only the sound of crickets can be heard in the darkness as he walks around the outside of the building. Disturbingly, the sound of gunshots can be heard in the distance less than 5 minutes into the recording. It's worth mentioning that for the past few years, Cleveland has been ranked as one of the top 10 most dangerous cities in the US, making this visit to the abandoned factory even more risky.
That's Cleveland. Wow. That's crazy. It's not even that far away from here. Oh, that sounds like a shootout.
Chris has experience exploring everything from abandoned mental hospitals and sanatoriums to vacant occult temples, and he shrugs off the fear as he enters the creepy building. Just like in many abandoned buildings, Chris finds a mattress on the floor, meaning at least one person has been sleeping there recently. As he captures footage of the first floor and walks up the stairs to the second floor, all that can be heard in the eerie darkness is the sound of his footsteps. A few minutes later, Chris goes down to the basement, and the footage becomes increasingly creepier as Chris runs into a series of dead ends under the leaky, moldy ceiling.
Okay, I'm hearing something. Maybe it's an animal. There's animals down here.
At several points during his exploration of the basement, he can be heard making comments about a strange noise coming from somewhere on that floor, and at first he seems to think it's an animal. Alarmingly, he finds a few shell casings on the ground from what was probably a 9mm handgun. Although it would be pretty unsettling to find something like this lying on the ground in an abandoned factory basement, it's worth mentioning that police departments often use abandoned buildings and complexes for training exercises. However, in this case, it's impossible to know if that's really what happened. Shortly after, he comes across a series of disturbing messages on the walls. He continues recording as he walks down narrow corridors, and this is where things get a lot more disturbing.
This place is so wet. Oh, you scared the out of me. Yo. You need some help, bro? Yo. He's not even responding. I'm gonna leave him alone. Get the fuck out of his way. Bro, that's crazy.
After about 20 minutes of exploring, the visit takes a very dark turn as Chris runs into a hunched over man without a light at the far end of the room. He calls out to him and asks if he needs any help, but the man doesn't move or respond, and Chris decides to leave him alone. Understandably, Chris's breathing can be heard getting louder and heavier after the extremely unsettling encounter, but things were only about to get more disturbing for him.
You know what? I'm gonna help that dude out. I'm gonna get this dude a $20 bill. Yo. Hey, I got some money for you.
He's not there, and he's not responding.
About 4 minutes later, Chris decides to go back to help the man out by giving him a $20 bill. But alarmingly, when he goes back to the room, the man is no longer there. This could be incredibly dangerous, as squatters are known to behave aggressively toward unwanted visitors. And because they know the place better than anyone else, they can easily hide in the shadows and attack or scare visitors when they least expect it. One theory that many viewers seemed to favor was that maybe the man was not a homeless person at all, but a gang member who was hiding from the shootout that could be heard at the beginning of the video. However, it's impossible to confirm if this was actually the case, and it seems pretty unlikely given his strange behavior. As he continues searching for the man, Chris notices bats flying around the basement, and things get even more eerie at this point.
There's a lot of bats down here too.
Right when he walks into one of the rooms, if you look closely at the far left of the screen, you can actually see the man from earlier standing in what used to be a door frame, staring at Chris in the darkness. Alarmingly, Chris doesn't notice and continues walking. It's impossible to know how long the man had been following him, and in these kind of situations, it can be hard to gauge the squatter's intentions. A few minutes later, the squatter can be seen walking outside as cars pass by the side of the building. At one point, Chris mentions he thinks the guy said hello, but it can't be heard clearly through the camera audio. Just when he decides to head out, he hears a cell phone vibrate, indicating that there are more people down there with him hiding in the darkness. Having had enough disturbing encounters for the night, he decides to play it safe, and fortunately he was able to leave the building unharmed. He never found out who that man was, and since then he hasn't uploaded another video of the Westinghouse factory. This video was recorded in Tartu, Estonia, and uploaded to YouTube in August of 2016. In it, a group of 4 teenagers visit an abandoned sauna that was built more than a century ago in 1915, back when Estonia was still part of the Russian Empire. After fulfilling its purpose for 80 years, the sauna was decommissioned in 1995. The building remained abandoned for 23 years until in 2018 it was fully renovated and turned into a beauty salon, which is still operating as of this video's upload in 2023. In August of 2016, the uploader visited the abandoned location with 3 friends. Upon entering the building, you can see that it looks exactly what you would expect a building that has been abandoned for 21 years to look like. There's an insane amount of mold growing freely on the walls, the heaters are covered in a thick layer of rust, the floor is full of holes, and the entire structure looks like it could collapse at any second. Throughout the video, the teenage explorers also run into some disturbing messages on the walls. An especially eerie one reads, "You can't hide," and there are also several creepy drawings of stick figures graffitied on the walls in some of the other rooms. For the first few minutes of the visit, other than the disturbing messages and some loose shoes and other personal belongings, there doesn't seem to be any indication that somebody could be living there or had even visited the location recently. However, about 20 minutes into the visit, one of the teenagers finds a door frame covered by a curtain, and they decide to explore the room. As one of the explorers shines a flashlight into the room, a gut-wrenching scream can be heard coming from the shadows. Immediately, the 4 teenagers run out of the building in a panic. When they finally step outside, the sun is already set, and the boys get into the car to flee from the location. Although the explorer was too busy running to show footage of the screaming man, it's more than likely that it was a homeless resident of the abandoned building who wasn't expecting visitors. Still, it must have been extremely disturbing to experience something like that, even if they went together as a group. After that day in 2016, the boys never went back to the abandoned sauna again. In March of 2022, YouTubers Meg and Chris uploaded a new video to their channel, Back in Time MC, in which they showed footage of their visit to a rundown old farmhouse somewhere in the UK. In the caption, they mentioned that they found an entry point through an open window around the side of the house. Based on the state of disarray the farmhouse is in, it's clear that nobody has been maintaining it for quite some time. The floor is covered in leaves and cobwebs, the shoes look dusty and unused, and there are even a couple of dead animals lying on the floor, along with some shotgun shells lying on top of a bedside table. The only clues that indicate somebody could have been at the location relatively recently are that one of the light bulbs in one of the bedrooms looks relatively new, and some of the clothes in the closet look only gently used. Based on the pictures that Chris finds on different shelves and hung up on the walls, it appears as if a family of at least 4 children used to live in the farmhouse. As the couple continues with the exploration, they walk into one of the upstairs bedrooms, where they find something very unexpected.
Carpet that comes all the way across. Absolutely nuts. Maybe we'll come into this bedroom here. And wow.
Can I help you?
Oh my god! Hello! You're alive!
You are?
You know, man,
You live in here, you can't live in here. Yeah? You
No!
can't. But we can't.
We thought it was abandoned. We thought it was abandoned.
You can't live in here.
When he first walked into the room, Chris didn't notice that there was someone asleep in the bed. It wasn't until Meg walked in and made a noise that the woman sleeping in the bed woke up and gave them the scare of their life. Although the uploaders blurred the woman's face out of respect for her privacy, it's clear that she's pretty old. During the conversation, she tells the couple that she doesn't have any family that could take her to live somewhere else less depressing. Out of sheer kindness, Chris and Meg keep the lady company and try their best to understand her situation. She introduces herself as Jane, and over the next 10 minutes they ask her questions about how she ended up living all alone in an abandoned farmhouse. Thanks to the couple's empathy, the initial shock of being startled by the sleeping old lady and seeing her living in such terrible conditions quickly turns into a heartwarming moment in which the 3 of them talk about each other's lives.
What happened was, I came here to help somebody.
Okay.
And this is only for a week I'm coming.
Yeah.
And that was 1993.
Oh god.
Wow, she's been here nearly 30 years.
Yeah.
Disturbingly, Jane mentioned she's been living in the abandoned farmhouse for 30 years, and even though Chris and Meg offer to help her, bring her food, and buy her clean clothes and sheets, she seems hesitant to accept anything from them, claiming that she's fine living the way she does. She mentions that even though it's not her house, the men who work at the farmhouse know she's there and they bring her food and water every day. In a touching moment at the end, the couple agrees with Jane to visit her again soon. This would have been a happy ending to the story, but Chris and Meg included a caption at the end of the video that casts the situation in a more disturbing light. The caption reads, "I did a lot of research to try and find the name of the farm and whom it was owned by. Luckily, I got the information needed, and I even got a message from someone who knew the farmer who farms there." Chris goes on to explain that the man who reached out to him also knew that Jane was living there, and that the farmer also lives in the farmhouse with her. According to the man, Jane is very well cared for, but she chooses to live in those terrible conditions anyway. The man also mentioned that Jane's husband is up there constantly to make sure she's okay, but she doesn't accept his help very easily, or anyone's help for that matter. It's worth mentioning that Jane might not have been completely truthful about her situation to Chris and Meg. During their conversation, she mentioned that she didn't have anyone to care for her except for the farmer, but the man who knew the farmer told Chris that she also has a brother who tries to take care of her. Not entirely convinced by what the man told him, Chris continued digging for information and found that the farm was not on any land registry records, but there was another property to Jane's name that she owned between 1986 and 2015. After visiting the other property, Chris mentioned that it was as unkempt and beat up as the farmhouse itself. Having heard 2 different versions of the story from the man who contacted him and from Jane herself, he decided to contact Adult Social Services. This is the email he received from them. "Good morning, thank you for your email. I can confirm that Adult Social Care are aware of this lady, however, I'm not able to provide you with any further details. We appreciate your input and the information you have provided, and thank you for raising your concerns with us." Chris then told the man who contacted him to tell Jane that he and Meg would be happy to go back and visit her if she wanted them to. After this, there were no further updates on the old woman, and we'll likely never know what became of her. The only thing we know for sure is that if someone else decides to explore the abandoned farmhouse in the future, they'll likely run into the same situation as Chris and Meg. Sadly, this type of situation is much more common than many people realize. With rising prices and the overall state of the global economy, a large part of the elderly population is being forgotten. Hopefully, Jane can accept some help from her family members and live out the rest of her days in much better and healthier conditions than the one she was in when the video was uploaded. Robert Fulton Elementary is an abandoned school in a pretty rough neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. The building is 92 years old and has been abandoned for over 13 years. After several complaints from nearby residents who mentioned that the abandoned building was an eyesore, a potential crime hotspot, and that it was lowering the value of their properties, the mayor of Cleveland announced plans to turn the rundown old building into a high-quality, mixed-income housing unit for the community. Although the idea is still in the planning stages and the city needs more funding to complete the project, the plan is for the renovations to begin by the end of 2024. For now, Robert Fulton Elementary remains one of the creepiest abandoned schools in the country. In May of 2023, Chris Hill, again from the YouTube channel Urbex Hill, uploaded a video in which he made a second visit to the boarded-up, abandoned elementary school. The first video he made of the school was back in 2022. During his first visit, he heard strange humming, chanting, creaking, and banging noises coming from different rooms. This was part of the description in the first video. Most sections of the building are falling apart, and the water and elements have done irreversible damage to the structure. I would not recommend anyone explore this school. You risk getting robbed or worse. With that being said, I heard weird noises and other various things during my exploration. After these incidents, the vast majority of people would have been too terrified to even think of going back, but 2 years later, Chris decided to make a second visit to the school alone at 1 a.m.
The decay is crazy in here.
From the very beginning of the footage, it's clear that Robert Fulton Elementary belongs in a different category of abandoned buildings than most others. What stands out the most about the building is the fact that just over a decade ago, children were learning in those classrooms, running and playing in the halls, and now it looks more like something out of a horror movie than a school. The eeriness of the location, the pitch darkness, and the extreme state of decay of the building all contribute to the school's incredibly creepy atmosphere, and not a lot of people would dare go in there at night, much less alone. For a building that has only been abandoned for 13 years, Robert Fulton Elementary is in a much worse state than other buildings that have been vacant for much longer. But Chris doesn't seem to mind as he captures footage of the dark corridors with peeling walls and random debris lying all over the floor. As he ventures deeper into the school, Chris starts hearing strange noises, but nobody seems to be around, and he continues his exploration in the chilling silence. The underlying structure in some of the rooms on the upper floors seems extremely unstable, but Chris shows his expertise in urban exploration by avoiding the surfaces that crack under his feet. After about 15 minutes of exploring the top floors, Chris goes down into the basement, which is arguably the most deteriorated part of the school. As he explores the dark rooms, he finds some indications that other people could be living there. Interestingly, he also finds what appears to be a boiler room that's been flooded with water. At around the 30-minute mark, a loud banging noise can be heard coming from one of the rooms, and it becomes very clear that Chris is not alone. As he steps into one of the classrooms, he finds a very eerie message written on the chalkboard, which reads, "Don't explore alone," as well as a paper sign on the door that reads, "Keep out." Despite the clear warnings, he goes inside, only to find more signs that somebody's living there. This is where Chris's visit to Robert Fulton Elementary takes a very chilling turn. Fearing for his life after hearing the blood-curdling scream, he sprints out of the building to safety, hoping that the man wasn't following him. If you look closely at the footage, you can see the outline of the screaming man when Chris peels back the curtain to his room. Upon reviewing the footage later that night, he found something else even more unsettling. When he first walked into the building, his camera caught something that he didn't notice at the time. In the distance, a man's shadow can be seen walking into one of the rooms. It's not clear where the man went after that, but based on the strange noises Chris heard throughout his visit, it's very likely that the man was watching him all along. Although the scream was terrifying to hear, and we can only imagine what Chris must have felt at that moment, it's worth mentioning that the room he entered was probably the man's home, and from the squatter's perspective, it was probably just as terrifying to see a random man pull back the curtain to his room. These kinds of encounters can often get violent very quickly, but thankfully Chris once again made it out safely. He hasn't uploaded new footage of the location since then. This footage was uploaded in October 2019 by YouTuber Baker X Derek, a tour guide from San Bernardino, California. One day, as he was riding his motorcycle on the highway in California, he noticed an abandoned house sitting on top of a hill and decided to take a look inside. From the very beginning of the footage, it becomes clear that somebody has already been there, and that it probably wasn't the original owners of the house. Unlike many abandoned buildings, you can tell this house used to be beautiful before it was vacated, but that doesn't make it any less creepy to visit, even in the middle of the day.
Oh, heebie-jeebies, dude. Dude, that dark room. I kept feeling something was gonna jump out at me. What's down here? I think I hear somebody. I think I hear something.
Derek goes down to explore one of the rooms on the bottom floor, and this is where he hears a disturbing thud. Terrified, he makes a run for it and even trips and falls on his way out, but eventually he gets back on his motorcycle and flees the location. As per one of the most popular theories proposed by viewers, the noise was probably made by a homeless person who was trying to warn Derek to get out of his home. Although squatters don't spend all their time lurking in the shadows, it's common for them to use the darkness as a tool when someone comes into the building unannounced. It's a basic rule of urban exploration that if you hear a loud noise upon entering a room, you should probably leave. Sometimes squatters make a noise as a first and final warning to drive visitors away respectfully. If Derek had pushed forward, he may have been attacked by whoever was hiding in the darkness. It's a natural impulse to call out and announce your presence in these kinds of situations, but squatters will very rarely answer these calls in a normal way. Nobody likes to be seen living in those conditions, and more often than not, the response will be rather aggressive and sometimes even violent. Fortunately, in this case, Derek was able to get away from the potentially dangerous situation just in time. In central Ontario, Canada, there's a small community south of Port Elgin known as North Bruce. To the locals, however, it's known as the Devil's Elbow. According to John, the urban explorer who uploaded this video, the reason for the name was that there was once an occult high priest who lived in the mansion at a cul-de-sac, in which the townspeople used to think there was paranormal activity due to the occult rituals the priest used to perform in his home. The mansion has since been abandoned, and as of today, nobody wants to buy it or live in it due to its chilling atmosphere and sketchy past. According to John, some renovations have been made sporadically since the house was vacated, but as of the video's upload, the house was still abandoned. In 2019, John set out to explore the occult mansion alone at night, but things didn't go exactly as he planned. In comparison to other abandoned buildings, the mansion seems to be in relatively good shape, except for the garage, which has clearly seen better days. About 5 minutes into the exploration, John starts to hear strange noises upstairs, but they seem to quiet down as soon as he climbs the set of stairs.
Okay guys, I think I've been hearing stuff upstairs, but I'm hoping, and I mean this, I really hope that it's paranormal and not someone freaking in here. Freaking somebody down there, dude. Come on, quit messing with me. I'm just trying to freaking, I'll leave. There's somebody else in here. As I've got myself in a bad situation. Oh, jeez.
Disturbingly, as he walks around upstairs, the noises can be heard again, even louder this time, leading John to think that perhaps someone else is in there messing with him. Although he mentions loudly to whoever is in there with him that his only intention is to explore and that he doesn't want to bother anyone, whoever was making the noise doesn't respond and continues hiding. The noises stop for a couple minutes, but then something terrifying happens.
There's the door open. Oh my god, Freelander. Hello?
there somebody here? I'm not here to bother or rob anything. I was just here exploring. I thought it was a bad.
Disturbingly, a man's voice can be heard screaming, "I'm gonna kill you," and before catching a glimpse of who it is, John runs out of the mansion immediately and doesn't look back until he's a safe distance away from the building. It's unknown who was in the house or how long they had been watching him, or even if they had bad intentions or were just messing with him. According to several viewers, it's very unlikely that the other person in the house was another explorer. In the urban exploration community, people usually help each other out, and there's a sort of code that every explorer sticks to in order to help keep creepy locations as safe to visit as possible. If the other person in the house was another explorer, making noises in an abandoned house and screaming, "I'm going to kill you," would obviously be very out of the ordinary. That leaves the question of who could have screamed at John. It's more than likely that it was just a homeless person who didn't want any visitors, but because John ran out before he could see anyone, this much will probably remain unknown forever. In September 2019, 40-year-old Stephen Weber Jr. and his girlfriend Kenesha Antoine went on a vacation to Pemba Island. Stephen had been dating Kenesha for a while by this point and had planned to propose to her during this trip. What neither of them knew, however, was that the happiest trip of their lives was about to turn into an irreversible tragedy. The groundwork for this tragedy was laid when the two arrived at the island and checked in to stay at the Manta Resort just off the coast. It had a nice, uninterrupted view of the ocean, as well as a roof area to relax and enjoy the tropical weather. However, the most important feature of this resort was the underwater room, which offered a 360-degree view of the marine life surrounding the resort. This room served as the whole idea behind how Stephen had planned to propose. He put on swimming goggles and dived down to one of the windows in this room, prompting Kenesha to begin recording. He then unrolled a paper note inside a Ziploc bag and pressed it against the window. It read, "I can't hold my breath long enough to tell you everything I love about you, but everything I love about you, I love more every day." He then flipped the note, and on the other side was a marriage proposal for Kenesha, reading, "Will you please be my wife?"
Oh, it's so cute. What?
He'd also showed the wedding ring he'd brought for this occasion before swimming up to hear Kenesha's response. At this point, Kenesha stopped recording and rushed to the surface floor, eager to give her answer. But once she looked outside, instead of a smiling Stephen, she saw nothing. Stephen was nowhere to be seen. Kenesha climbed the roof, hoping he might have been up there. Unfortunately, there were no signs of Stephen anywhere. He had vanished somewhere between showing her the ring and swimming up to the surface. After understanding the full gravity of the situation, Kenesha called for help, with several locals rushing to her aid. Unfortunately, it took some time to find Stephen. He was floating in the water, and by that point, it was already too late. Some resort workers tried to revive him with CPR, however, it wasn't effective. Stephen had miscalculated how long he could hold his breath underwater and drowned before he could reach the surface. You can even see his hand shaking as he holds the ring near the end of the video, his body desperately telling him he needs air now. But in an effort to get his point across and make the moment that much more special, he ignores this, and unfortunately pays the ultimate price. Mini Joe is a YouTube channel that occasionally posted travel videos up until 3 years ago. Most of these were typical travel vlogs showcasing the hosts of different expeditions around the world. However, out of the roughly 30 videos they've uploaded, one stands out for just how disturbing it is. This video contains a collection of footage Joe and his friends captured while doing technical dives in the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, which is often considered the deadliest diving spot in the world. There are a few conflicting reports on the total number, but most people agree that somewhere between 130 and 200 divers have met their end while trying to reach its depths. That is an average of 8 lives lost per year, and unfortunately, the total is still going up. What's worse is that the remains of many victims are never recovered, which is exactly what made Mini Joe's video so unsettling. Their dive started off like any other, but as they descended deeper, they came across the tanks, lines, and suits of those who came before and never made it back. Some of the remains were wedged into narrow crevices on the ocean floor, hinting at what might have gone wrong for them. Most were also taken over by the environment, suggesting they might have been down there for years. Above all, these encounters served as a constant reminder of the true danger of technical diving. Divers often have to carry multiple heavy tanks before they can even begin the descent. Then, once they're in the water, they have to constantly monitor their oxygen levels while also staying aware of their surroundings. Things only become more dangerous the deeper they dive, where even a moment's distraction can quickly turn fatal. However, all of this is true for any dive, regardless of the location. What makes the Dahab Blue Hole even more dangerous is the false sense of security it provides. Blue holes, for those who don't know, are like vertical caves in oceans that go a lot deeper than the surrounding ocean floor. And the one in Dahab, Egypt is an even more extreme version of that. One of the biggest contributors to its deadliness is its depth of about 426 feet, or around 130 meters, which isn't very apparent from the surface. It's also an almost vertical drop to the bottom. This catches many new divers off guard, causing them to miscalculate their gas levels and tragically become another name on the memorial near the diving site. One of the most well-known cases of this is 22-year-old Yuri Lipsky, a Russian diving instructor with plenty of experience under his belt. However, he had no prior experience with the Dahab Blue Hole, resulting in it taking his life. The footage from his recovered diving camera showed him descending into the depths faster than expected, struggling to keep his gas levels in check, trying to quickly slow down his descent, causing the buoyancy device to burst, and eventually succumbing to nitrogen poisoning in just 4 minutes after starting his dive. However, the sheer depth is only one part of this blue hole's danger. As Mini Joe's video demonstrated, the other part of its lethality comes from the network of partially collapsed caves littered throughout the area. They promise incredible views and look like prime diving spots at first glance, but in all reality, they are deceptively difficult to navigate through. Narrow passages and jagged rocks are everywhere. A single mistake can leave a technical diver stuck in one of these caverns with no way out until their gas tanks inevitably run out. The terrain also makes recovery extremely difficult, and many families of the fallen often opt to just leave their loved ones down there so as not to endanger even more lives in recovery attempts, which explains why Joe came across so many diving suits in his video. In July 2016, a diver named Jacob Childs went on a group diving trip off the coast of southeast Queensland, Australia. The boat stopped roughly 35 miles or about 56 kilometers off the coast, and Jacob was the second to last person to dive. However, a minute after entering the water, the diving line slipped out of his hand. He thought he could swim back to the boat and start over, but as he got closer, he was shocked to realize the rope had been pulled in. And before he could think of what to do next, a strong current swept the ocean surface and separated him from the boat. To make matters worse, the captain of the boat also sped off to go fishing while everyone was diving. By the time the other divers got back to the boat and realized Jacob was missing, he was already completely out of their view, leaving him stranded in the middle of the ocean 35 miles from the nearest piece of land. That said, the distance from land was the least of Jacob's worries at that moment. For starters, the water around him was nearly 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This wasn't nearly cold enough to make him freeze up and pass out immediately, but it was cold enough to slowly sap away his body heat, making him more susceptible to hypothermia and exhaustion with every passing minute. It was also late in the afternoon and the sun was about to go down, meaning it was only going to get worse. After a while, a rescue plane flew above him twice, but it didn't see him. And this was while it was still bright and the inflatable indicator was visible from quite a distance. He knew that once it got dark, his chances of being rescued would drop to almost zero.
Well, the sun's going down. If the sun goes down, they won't do nothing. That's a wrap on old Jakey, I guess.
Unfortunately, there was nothing Jacob could do at that moment but wait and continue recording what possibly could be his last message to his family. Identifying the right direction and then swimming for over 35 miles would have been next to impossible. If he had taken it upon himself to try and reach the coast, he would have likely exhausted himself and drowned partway through. He did try to follow a fishing boat he saw in the distance, but quickly realized that he wouldn't be able to get close enough to get its attention, leaving him feeling dejected.
It's way too far for me. It'd be like 15, 16 meters now.
Besides, swimming too far from his original location would have also reduced his chances of being saved, since rescue teams would no longer know where to look. As the sky got darker and the rescue plane failed to spot him multiple times, the frustration was beginning to set in.
There's a plane coming back. There's a rescue boat way over there. Helpful, that.
The salty seawater was also making him extremely dehydrated, worsening his chances of survival by the minute. However, Jacob was experienced enough to know that panicking or getting angry wouldn't do any good. The right thing to do was to stay put while exerting the least amount of effort. After drifting in the middle of nowhere for over 6 hours, he was finally spotted by a helicopter and brought to safety on a rescue boat. With the sun nearly below the horizon, he came dangerously close to losing his life that day. Fortunately, he was able to recover with no permanent injuries. On the 26th of May 2013, a group of 3 tugboats was trying to stabilize an oil tanker during a harsh storm nearly 20 miles or 32 kilometers off the coast of Nigeria. That's when one of the boats, named Jaskin 4, got hit by a massive rogue wave. This capsized the boat, causing it to sink rapidly and disappear below the water surface within seconds. The company behind this operation, West African Ventures, immediately sent off a rescue mission. However, the harsh weather made any immediate rescue efforts near impossible. They eventually sent a helicopter to look for any survivors who managed to swim back to the surface. Unfortunately, even after a full day of searching, they didn't find a single member of the Jaskin 4's crew who was still alive. This left the company with no choice but to presume the crew deceased and begin a body recovery diving mission instead. The task of retrieving their remains was handed down to 6 saturation divers who were laying underwater oil pipes nearby. The only reason they were chosen for the task was because they were the closest to the site of the incident. Still, it took them around a day to reach the site and begin looking for Jaskin 4. The harsh waves had shifted its position significantly from where it capsized, causing even more time lost before the retrieval mission could begin. Unfortunately, that was far from the only hurdle the rescue divers would face on this mission. Once they located the Jaskin 4 and dove down to it, they discovered that the boat had turned upside down. It was now resting on its primary mast, which could collapse at any time. Due to significant pirate activity in that area, all of the Jaskin 4's entrances were also locked shut, forcing the divers to use specialized underwater torches just to gain access. Sadly, their assumption turned out to be correct. By the afternoon of the 28th of May, 2 days after Jaskin 4 had sunk, the rescue team managed to recover the remains of 4 crew members, though 2 were still missing. But just as all hope seemed lost, one of the divers, named Tony Walker, made an incredible discovery. For some context, Tony was being instructed on what to do by his supervisor Colby Verretz from the surface. Tony was also inhaling a gas mixture which was partially helium, making his voice higher. While looking around the upside-down boat, he came across what looked like a human hand. He assumed it belonged to yet another fallen crew member, but to his surprise, the hand moved and grabbed him back.
All right, so you should be walking on the ceiling, yeah? Okay. What's that? Okay. All right, you found one, yeah? He's alive. He's alive. Okay, keep him there. Keep him there. All right. Just. All right. All right. Just hold him there, okay? Just keep him there. No, I don't know what we're gonna do. All right, just keep him there and keep him calm, okay? All right, just reassure him, pat him on the shoulder. Okay.
This was 29-year-old Harrison O'Kenny, Jaskin 4's resident cook. After over 60 hours underwater, Harrison was somehow still alive. He also seemed quite aware of everything that was going on around him and remained calm to help the rescuers do their job. Apparently, Harrison was in the bathroom when the boat capsized. He tried to rush to the emergency latch, but water rushed in and trapped the crew inside. To his knowledge, Harrison was the only one who managed to survive after creating a makeshift indoor raft from plywood, cardboard, and a mattress. After finding him, rescuers gave him fresh water and a harness to keep him close. However, the divers knew they didn't have much time to plan a proper rescue mission. You see, the air pocket Harrison was in was about to run out, likely in less than an hour. Harrison could end up suffocating if they didn't act quick enough. On the other hand, they couldn't just strap him into a rope and pull him back to the surface. He had already spent over 2.5 days in an extremely high-pressure environment. Taking him to the surface too quickly could have caused decompression sickness, which in extreme cases can also be lethal. Fortunately, due to their job of installing underwater oil pipes, the divers were uniquely equipped to deal with these exact issues. More specifically, they had a pressurized diving bell attached to the vessel, which they put Harrison in after consulting a doctor. Had this been a standard diving crew with regular scuba gear, they wouldn't have had anything to keep Harrison alive. Once back on the surface, he also had to spend some more time in a decompression chamber to avoid decompression sickness, and was fairly okay after that. However, while he recovered physically, the mental trauma of being trapped in an upside-down boat on the ocean floor for over 2 days with no idea if anyone was coming to save him left him with PTSD, something he is still recovering from to this day. On December 13, 2013, YouTuber Kodiak Thunder uploaded a video showing a near-death experience he had while diving. Unlike many other divers, Kodiak's motive wasn't to just dive as deep as he could or reach some underwater landmark. Instead, his diving sessions were more about catching fish and crustaceans by hand or with a spear gun. But while chasing a lobster, he swam too far into an underwater cave. He managed to catch the lobster he was after, but when he turned around, he had no idea how to get out. Fortunately, after swimming around in the cave for a few minutes, he was able to find the exit and swim out without any trouble. However, this was incredibly lucky. The thing is, diving on its own is incredibly dangerous. A single distraction can quickly spiral into an irreversible tragedy. But unless they're very deep, divers at least have the option to just swim up to the surface and wait for rescue. Though, not with cave diving. One of the primary hazards in a cave is the environment itself. Unlike the open ocean, many underwater caves have floors covered in extremely fine silt. A poorly controlled fin kick, or even the exhaust bubbles from a regulator hitting the ceiling can dislodge this sediment. This creates a silt out, a condition where the water's visibility drops to absolute zero instantly. Divers' high-powered lights become useless, and in some extreme cases, the diver can't even see their own hands, let alone their surroundings. This also makes them unable to see their gauges or the guidelines. In short, they no longer know where they're going, where they're supposed to go, or whether they're getting the right gas mixture. At best, they can keep swimming and hope the cave is straight enough to eventually lead them away from the murky water. But if they can't monitor their gases, nitrogen poisoning can become a serious problem. It impairs both their cognitive and motor function, leaving them to take their final breaths in the cave unless someone is there to rescue them. Even then, rescue isn't always an option. Many underwater caves are extremely narrow, and with tanks and other essential gear, navigating these tight spaces becomes even harder. In most cases, there isn't even enough room to turn around, so if one diver passes out, the others can get trapped behind them and lose their lives there as well. One of the most well-known cases of this exact scenario happened on February 6, 2014, when a team of 5 Finnish cavers visited Norway to go cave diving through Plura Cave. All 5 of them were veteran cave divers and knew exactly what they were doing. They even had mapped out the exact route they planned to follow. However, as they were crossing the narrowest section of the cave, the cylinder of one of the divers got stuck, preventing him from moving forward and blocking the others behind him. The chaos of the situation resulted in 2 of the divers panicking, failing to monitor their gauges, and passing away within minutes. The other 3 barely made it out alive as well. One had to squeeze past the stuck diver by removing his gear and swimming the rest of the way, gasping for air from tiny pockets along the ceiling. The remaining 2 had to turn back and exit through the original entrance with almost no air left in their tanks. The fact that any of them made it out alive was nothing short of a miracle, highlighting the true horror of underwater cave diving. Because when things go even slightly wrong during a cave dive, even the most experienced and well-prepared divers can struggle to survive. On the 30th of June 2025, a reporter named Linildo Frazão went live from the Miriam River in Brazil to cover a tragic incident that happened there just a day earlier. In the early hours of June 29, a group of teenagers had decided to go for a swim in the river. Unfortunately, they underestimated its depth, resulting in the disappearance of 13-year-old Raíssa Fernandes. Seconds after entering the water, her friends watched her dip beneath the surface, and that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Divers looked for her underwater while rescuers scoured the riverbank, hoping she might have washed ashore somewhere. But even after hours of searching, Raisa was nowhere to be found. Lineal Do intended to use this broadcast as an opportunity to educate viewers on the dangers of river currents and general river safety, not knowing that he was about to solve the mystery of Raisa's disappearance on live TV. He took off his shoes and started slowly walking into the river while talking about the sudden increase in depth and how dangerous it can be for inexperienced swimmers.
Quanto mais você desce, mais fundo fica. Ó, aqui, ó. Até que aqui é de boa, mas só que é uma descida. Aqui onde ela se afogou, gente, é uma descida. Pra você ver aqui, ó, o tanto que eu passei aqui, daqui dá mais ou menos uns 2,5 metros. Ó, e quanto mais você anda, ó a diferença aqui já onde eu estou agora, ó. Então, pessoal, e ainda tem a correnteza. Aqui já, olha, ó, um passinho para frente, a água já está praticamente me cobrindo. Então, o risco aqui é muito grande, é muito grande.
However, nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter just seconds later.
Ó a fundura aqui, ó. Ui. Eu acho que tinha um negócio aqui no fundo da água. Não, era mole. Será que não é ela não?
While trying to demonstrate the river's deceptive drop-off, Lineal Do accidentally stepped on something lying on the riverbed. It was too soft and organic feeling to be a rock or a submerged log, which caught him off guard. The murky water made it impossible to see beneath the surface. But Lineal Do was starting to realize what it could be, leaving him too disturbed to go back and investigate further. He got out of the water and contacted authorities immediately. And it wasn't long before divers recovered the remains of Raisa from that exact spot. Later autopsy report confirmed that there was no foul play involved. What happened to her was nothing more than a tragic accident. On September 25, 2025, the CBS 6 station in Albany, New York received a strange email with a 2-page document. It contained a nearly incomprehensible rant featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger, archaic centuries-old laws, and a proposal to create a board of trustees with prosecutorial immunity. However, the most important aspect of this document wasn't its content. Instead, the reason it stood out among the hundreds of emails the channel received every day was its author, 53-year-old Lawrence Krauss, who also included a selfie alongside the document. You see, Lawrence was currently under investigation for ending the lives of his own parents and getting away with it for over 8 years. It happened in August 2017. His 86-year-old father and 83-year-old mother were living out their retirement in their home in Crestwood Court in Albany, New York. And suddenly they were gone without a trace. None of the neighbors saw them leaving or heard anything about where they were going. Their house was also left abandoned, with Lawrence only visiting it occasionally to collect mail, mow the lawn, and clear the snow. When asked about his parents, he claimed that they had moved back to Germany and won't be coming back. The neighbors had no reason to distrust Lawrence, so no one questioned their absence and life went on as usual. A distant relative even requested a welfare check in 2020. But the neighbors repeated the same explanation Lawrence had given, ending the officer's questioning without any further suspicion. It wasn't until mid-2025 that the Albany police became aware of something shady going on with the Krauss family. Someone had been collecting Lawrence's parents' social security payments, even though the two hadn't been seen in years. This resulted in the police launching a formal investigation, and after months, finally executing a search warrant at the Krauss home on September 23rd. Over the next 48 hours, detectives collected thousands of financial documents and other evidence. More importantly, they discovered the remains of Lawrence's parents buried in the backyard. Lawrence likely knew that he was the prime suspect in this case, but instead of turning himself in or trying to run away, he made the unusual decision of sending this document to the local news network alongside his contact information. One of the directors at CBS 6 was familiar with the Krauss case and immediately jumped at the opportunity to interview Lawrence. After giving him a call, Lawrence claimed that he was willing to do a live interview with the channel only if they published his document on the internet for everyone to see. The network agreed, and less than an hour later, Lawrence was sitting with a CBS 6 reporter for a live interview. Lawrence was a bit hesitant at first, but after some pressure, he cracked and confessed to everything.
I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What did you do to your parents?
I buried them in their property.
You buried them in the backyard of that house in Albany.
Right.
When it actually happened, when your parents died, did they know it was happening to them?
Oh, yeah.
And they knew it was at your hand?
Well, yes, no one else's.
Right. So they They realized what you were doing to them as it happened.
Yes.
They knew that this was it for them, that they were perishing at your hand.
Yes. And it was so quick.
How did you do it?
Yeah, I can't talk about that.
Well, you've just told us that
Right.
it was at your hand.
Right.
Were there drugs involved?
No.
There a suffocation? You suffocated them? You suffocated your parents?
Yeah.
What made this confession so disturbing, however, was the way Lorenz tried to portray it as something righteous. His argument essentially boiled down to, my parents were suffering from old age, so I did them a favor. Even though the neighbors described the couple as elderly, they were by no means sick or bedridden. They had normal routines where they tended to their garden, shared mint leaves with neighbors' kids, and listened to Polish music every day. Their lives weren't nearly as miserable as Lorenz tried to portray during this interview. Now, it's unclear if he's severely mentally ill and genuinely believed everything he was saying, or if this interview was his way of trying to paint himself as the concerned son to earn the public's favor before his inevitable arrest. In either case, he had no way of escaping the consequences of his heartless actions. He was arrested immediately after walking out of the network's building and is currently awaiting trial for the death of his parents. On the night of October 28, 2023, the Utilita Arena in Sheffield, England was packed with over 8,000 spectators. They were there to watch the ice hockey match between the Nottingham Panthers and the Sheffield Steelers. The whole thing was also being broadcast live on TV for fans across the world, and the match started off completely normal. The first period ended without either team scoring a point. About 35 minutes later, the score was 4-2 in favor of the Sheffield Steelers. The Panthers needed to score soon if they wanted to make a comeback. So, one of their more renowned players, Adam Johnson, got a hold of the puck and started pushing into the Steelers' defensive zone. But before he could reach the goal, the match got interrupted by one of the most tragic incidents in ice hockey history. As Adam was making his way to the goal, a different player of his team bumped into Matt Petgrave of the Steelers. This resulted in Matt getting launched in the air and slicing Adam's neck with one of his skates. For those who don't know, professional hockey skates are sharpened to a razor's edge. So it took very little force to leave a deep laceration across Adam's neck, causing him to bleed profusely in front of both the live crowd and the TV audience. Medics at the arena tried to stop the bleeding, but the cut was too deep. He had already lost a lot of blood on the ice. Adam was then rushed to a nearby hospital. Unfortunately, despite going into surgery as quickly as possible, Adam couldn't survive the injury and passed away just hours later. Matt was arrested shortly after on suspicion that he had cut Adam on purpose. However, investigators found no foul play in Adam's death and ultimately ruled it a tragic accident. The only silver lining in this entire case is that it resulted in the English Ice Hockey Association making neck guards mandatory for all players, something that would have likely prevented this from happening altogether. But at the time, wearing this protective gear was only a suggestion. On the evening of September 2, 2011, TVN, one of the biggest networks in Chile, was airing the latest episode of a show called Calle 7. It was a live game show where teams competed in various challenges to make their way to the top, and this weekend's episode was supposed to be no different. But things took a disturbing turn about halfway through the episode when the show's host interrupted the competitors seemingly out of nowhere and told them to stop.
Quiero que paren la competencia. Quiero que paren la competencia, por favor. Nos acaba de llegar una información muy difícil de entregar. No habíamos querido decir nada antes de chequear bien lo que estaba sucediendo porque compromete a personajes del canal, a personas muy queridas, a un equipo del canal, entre ellos Felipe Camiroaga y Roberto Bruce, que también estaba en aquel vuelo a la isla de Juan Fernández, según tengo entendido. Es información que nos está llegando en este momento. El Ministerio de Defensa informó esta tarde el presidente de la República que un equipo de TVN iba al borde de una nave de la Fuerza Aérea de Chile que capotó en el archipiélago de Juan Fernández.
However, the reason for this interruption had nothing to do with the show itself. The host was talking about the C-212 Chilean Air Force plane that departed from the Arturo Merino Benitez International Airport earlier that day at around 2 p.m. It was headed for the Robinson Crusoe Airport, located hundreds of miles off the coast of Chile. Aboard was a full TV crew from the network, including the two renowned presenters, Felipe Camiroaga and Roberto Bruce. They were visiting Robinson Crusoe Island to report on the reconstruction after the 2010 earthquake. The flight started without a hitch. Unfortunately, as they were approaching the runway, the wind became extremely strong, making it impossible to land. The pilot tried to land a couple of times, circling in the air after each attempt. However, on the third attempt, witnesses saw the plane lose altitude much faster than expected and crash into the ocean just a mile from the island. By the time rescuers reached the crash site, it was already too late. All 21 people aboard the C-212 plane had passed away. But while investigators initially believed that all of those deaths were due to the impact of the crash, the reality turned out to be far darker. As they were searching the wreckage, they found footage that one of the cameramen took of the interior shortly before the crash. The footage showed the passengers strapped into their seats, completely unaware of their fate. But the more haunting discovery happened when investigators found an SD card inside an empty water bottle floating near the crash site. This card contained hundreds of images. However, analysis of these images showed that 2 of them were taken after the crash, including one of the plane's windows covered in water. These images put the crash into a whole new perspective. They showed that several passengers, including the cameraman who took these photos and preserved the SD card in the bottle, likely survived the initial crash. Sadly, they were trapped inside a rapidly sinking plane with no way out, forced to watch their aircraft fill up with water until there was no air left to breathe. Niagara Falls is widely regarded as one of the world's most breathtaking natural wonders. However, while the surface is undeniably beautiful, the depths beneath the falls hide the disturbing history of many who lost their lives to the currents. One such incident was captured live on TV on May 30, 1985, when reporter Phil Kavitz was hosting a section about real estate in front of the falls. Suddenly, in the background, the camera captured a man caught in the current behind Phil. The rushing water carried him to the edge of the falls before throwing him over the 170-foot drop. And while a lucky few have survived the fall from the Niagara Falls, he wasn't one of them. The treacherous terrain under the falls also made it difficult to retrieve his remains. Once recovered, investigators identified the man as 56-year-old Robert Ahrens and concluded that the act was deliberate. However, Robert was only one of the 5,000 bodies that have been recovered from the foot of the falls in the last 175 years. Many of these 5,000 deaths were intentional, but there were a lot that weren't. And unfortunately, surviving a fall from Niagara Falls is near impossible. Once you fall in, the cold water makes it extremely difficult to breathe, making it even more challenging to swim to the surface. The water near the edge can also move at over 60 miles per hour, adding another layer of difficulty to an already impossible challenge. But the jagged rocks at the base of the falls is what marks the end for most people. On the 23rd of August 2010 at around 10 a.m., 21 tourists from Hong Kong returned to their tour bus after visiting the historic Fort Santiago in Manila, Philippines. They were also accompanied by 3 Filipino tour guides, and the trip had been going fantastic so far. But just as they were about to set out to the next location, they got interrupted by a middle-aged man in a police uniform. He was openly carrying multiple firearms, and his demeanor made it clear he wasn't afraid to use them either, something that became even more apparent as time went on. For now, things started off fairly calm, with him asking the driver for a ride to the next station. The bus driver tried to reject the request respectfully, explaining that he couldn't let him on because it was a private vehicle, not a public bus. However, the man wasn't having any of it. As soon as the bus driver rejected his request, he equipped one of his firearms and claimed that he was taking the bus hostage. This was 55-year-old Rolando Mendoza, a police officer with nearly 30 years of service. But he'd recently been fired over drug charges that Rolando claimed were untrue. Getting fired left him with no pension after 3 decades of hard work. And while he tried to fight for his job through official means, his superiors wouldn't listen. In an act of desperation and defiance, Rolando took this bus full of tourists hostage and presented a single demand: he wanted his job back. The situation so far looked fairly manageable, with 2 of his former colleagues establishing communications without any pushback. They were even able to convince him to release a few of the hostages. Granting his relatively simple demand would have been easy. But what followed was one of the biggest hostage disasters in the country's history, all because those in charge couldn't agree on the next move. Things started going downhill when Rolando's brother tried to approach the bus and was immediately detained by the officers. This made the already furious Rolando even angrier and more unstable. The situation only got worse once the media got involved. Nearly every news channel in the country started broadcasting the situation live. They talked about everything, including the plans officials were making outside. What they didn't know, however, was that the bus had a working TV and Rolando was watching and listening in on everything. This could have helped him formulate a plan and get what he wanted without hurting anyone. Unfortunately, the lackluster response from the officials made a peaceful resolution near impossible. His anger reached a boiling point when he saw how his brother was being treated by the police on live TV. This resulted in Rolando getting blinded by rage and opening fire on the hostages. Around the same time, the bus driver managed to free himself from the handcuffs Rolando put him in and escape through the driver's side door. Unfortunately, while he was able to remain unharmed, other hostages weren't as lucky, since, according to the bus driver, they were all dead, leaving Rolando alone in the bus. This revelation gave authorities the go-ahead to surround the bus and try to break in without any more casualties. But Rolando wasn't willing to go down without a fight. As soon as they tried to enter through the emergency exit, Rolando opened fire, hitting one officer on his bulletproof helmet and barely missing the others. So the officers thought of a different strategy. They flooded the back of the bus with tear gas, forcing him to the front, right into the crosshairs of a sniper, finally ending the hostage crisis. It wasn't until after his death that police realized the bus driver had misunderstood the situation and that 9 of the hostages were still alive. The massive loss of innocent lives broadcast live for the world to see, coupled with officials making wrong decisions at every turn, drew intense global scrutiny, marking this as one of the worst and most tragic incidents in Filipino history.